So anyway, I got a lot of background stuff to talk about with Jacob, because as you recall, if you were here last week, we the lesson last Sunday was the birth of Isaac. Now Isaac's an old man. He's a father. He has two sons, and they're twins. And one of them is named Esau, and the second guy's name is Jacob. And they were born just moments apart. You know, one came out and then the other one came out. The story in the Bible says that Jacob was hanging on to Esau's foot. I don't know if that's true or not. That could be apocryphal. There's some strange things going on here in the story. A lot of things, and I can't explain them, so you'll have to just kind of bear with me. There's some mystery, some of the mystery of the gods, as we call it in the business. Things that can't be explained. Like, how can a man wrestle all night long? But anyway, here's the point. I got to get ahead of myself. We got to tell you the story about Jacob, how he got to be where he was. First of all, Jacob was his mother's child, and Esau was his dad's child. I don't know if you've ever been in families like that where one parent favors one and the other parent favors the other. All of us don't want to, as parents, don't ever want to admit that we had one favorite child that was the perfect one or the best one or the one we loved the most. Or like in that story with the prodigal son, maybe the kid that went and ran away and got in trouble. We all have parent stories about that stuff. That's just the way life is. You have favorites, but you just don't tell them that they're a favorite, do you? And you especially don't tell the other ones. I remember one time when I have two brothers, and this happened, this is a real story. But one night we were living in Michigan here, and my two brothers were together out in Virginia, and they went out for some refreshments, I think. And the phone rang, and one brother comes on the phone and says, "Tell him, Michael, that Mom liked him the best, you know." That's what the story was. Evidently, they've been socializing a little bit, I guess, I don't know. But I didn't have to decide that. My mom decided that, you know. So anyway, we got this dynamic going and it's important to know that because there's some stuff that goes on in our story today that makes it clear that there was some favoritism being shown by one parent as opposed to the other one. So here we go. First of all, Esau sells his birthright. For some reason, the birthright was very important. He sold that to Jacob for a pot of food, stew, soup, porridge, whatever. Esau comes in from hunting one day, and Jacob has got this pot on the stove, and it's full of good smelling food, and maybe the aroma, the ambiance of the food captured Esau's empty stomach, and he said, "I'm really hungry. Would you give me some of that?" He said, "Well, give me your birthright." That was terrible. Does that make sense? No. I don't think it makes sense, but he did it anyway. He sold his birthright for a pot of food, and then the real deception starts for the blessing. The second part of the thing was the blessing part of the story, where Jacob connived with his mother, Rebekah, where Isaac is in the tent and he's blind, and they go in and Jacob says, "I'm Esau, would you bless me?" And Isaac, I'm trying to get these names straight, Isaac blesses Jacob and thinking that he was Esau. So that's a dynamic that's not good. That's deception, that's not right, but he does it anyway. And then Esau comes later for a blessing and gets zilch, because Isaac has already given out his blessing to the other brother. So then the story goes on. Jacob has to leave town in a hurry because Esau is mad. So Jacob leaves and he goes up north. I mean, in the geography of the Israel, I looked on the map, and it goes from one end of the country to the other. It goes from the southern part, a place called Beersheba. He goes way up to Haran, which is way up near the top, up there where Laban is living. Now, I've been on this planet for a long time, and this is the first time I said I learned this by reading this passage, that Laban is Rebekah's brother. I don't know why that's important, but Laban is the guy where Jacob goes up north. And Laban has two daughters, one of them named Leah and one of them named Rachel. And Rachel's the one that Jacob falls for first. I mean, Jacob goes up there, he meets Rachel, and in the passage it said he even kissed her hello. You know, he was really infatuated with this young woman. So he says, I love you, I want to marry you. He goes to Laban. Laban says, no, you got to work for 7 years. 7 years you got to work for this so you can have Rachel. So what does he do? He works 7 years for Rachel, and who does he get? Leah. That's where the story gets complicated. I don't know about what happened how Laban did it, but Jacob went in the tent, and I'm not going to say any more. So all of a sudden he discovered he was with Leah. Now, Leah is the mother of, and I had to do this with a cheat sheet, because Leah has 4 sons and a daughter that I'm not going to talk about because that is a really bad story. Anyway, Leah has Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Those are her 4 sons. Rachel has 2 sons, one of them named Joseph, who we can't talk about, and the other one, Benjamin. Benjamin was born after our story today. But anyway, that's only 6. And then there's a couple other ladies, and they're called servant girls, I guess, handmaidens. And Jacob also fathers 4 children with these 2 ladies, one named Bilhah and Zilpah. And Dan and Naphtali are born to Bilhah, and Zilpah bears Gad, and one of those guys that used to be around here, his name was Asher. Everybody remember Asher, our intern? That's where he got his start, was from the servant girl. No, not really, but I'm just pulling Asher's leg. I don't know where Asher is anymore. Anyway, so these are the 12 tribes of Israel. That's the point. These children become the 12 tribes of Israel. And those are Jacob's children. And we're going to go on with the story now, because this is all background to this point, and I hope I didn't take as long as I did earlier. But anyway, the point being that Jacob's in a bad way. He decides he's going to come back to be with Esau because, they've been apart for a while, like 14 years, at least. Anyway, he's going back with his wives, and he finds out that Esau is coming for him with 400 men. 400 men. What does that sound like? That sounds like an army, doesn't it? He's coming with an army. So then Jacob gets a little bit afraid and scared. I would be scared when you have 400 guys were coming after me. It's time to run. But there's no place to run. So Jacob decides to go back home and see his brother. And his brother's coming towards him. And the good news is, this is like the rest of the story, they do have a good homecoming. There's a thing, and it's in the Bible. It's called, in the New Testament we call it anyway, it's called forgiveness. And Esau forgives his brother. Wow. Great. So anyway, then there's this wrestling match, which is hard to understand because it goes on all night long. All night long, Jacob's wrestling with this angel in in a long match that goes on. Like I said, the high school and the college ones were, 6, 8 minutes long with a little break in between. And I know, like I said, I used to go to matches when our son was in high school. He wrestled for Mason, and I know the great moment of his life was when he was a junior. He wrestled in the conference final meet, and he didn't do very well, but he was in the final match where they in wrestling they turned the lights down, and it was really spectacular to watch him wrestle at that kind of thing, because that's really as good as it got for him. Because then when he was a senior, he was sick, so he didn't do so well. But anyway, that happens. This thing about hanging is about perseverance. I can't emphasize that enough. That Jacob had perseverance. He may not have been the kind of guy that that you're really proud of to be your son or your somebody that you emulate. He had some bad things in his life, but he was living in this thing that all of us live in. It's called grace. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because there's a struggle all the time in our life. And the thing about the end of the match in the morning is kind of cool, where Jacob, the guy says, "Let go of me," and after he pulled his hip out of his socket, pulled Jacob's hip out of his socket, and so he's hurting really bad, and he still won't let go. Man, that's pretty good. So anyway, the thing goes down about blessing. And I got to put one more thing in here before I close, because it's more important to talk about. There's another wrestling that goes on in the New Testament, a story that we have to mention in passing. There's this Jesus who goes out in the night in which he's betrayed. He goes out into the Garden of Gethsemane, and he prays, and he prays, and he prays some more. And he perseveres with God, and he submits to God, and that has been encapsulated in stained glass windows. I remember in my last congregation we had a big circle stained glass window that went in the sanctuary there in the back on the wall. And by the way, that church building burned down one day, but they were able to save that window. And of course, that's very important to them. But that is Jesus praying, Father, take this cup away from me. And Jesus submits and says, nevertheless, your will be done. So what can we learn from all this? Well, here's the thing. Life is not a thing that we can say, well, I'm not going to get through this thing without some trouble. Because we all get into some kind of mischief and trouble in our life, and bad things happen to us. And that's where the grit comes in. That's where the perseverance comes in. That's where the hanging in there with God comes in. That's what Jacob tells us in his story. He struggles with God, and yet he prevailed. And then, the best part of the story is that Jacob gets his name changed, and it becomes the name of a country, but it also is a personhood, a religion, a way that they lived. It becomes Israel. And Israel means that I have striven with God and people and prevailed. So there isn't anything more symbolic than that. That religion is still with us as one of the oldest religions. I think there's some that may be older, I don't know. But anyway, the point being that God has always been around looking after us. But we can't give it up. We can't give it up. because there will be a day when we will need all the grit that we can pull together. I know. I've been there. I'm still there. Now I'm just having trouble walking around, so what the heck, you know? God still loves us. And that's what we live in and die in and have our being. Amen.